A moonless night, a lone rider gallops down a dirt path, the wind whipping through the trees, boots pressing secret orders into his heels. He believes he's alone. He believes he's safe, but in the shadows, three men lie in wait. What happens next will decide the fate of the American Revolution. But first, there's something that connects us all to history in ways we don't always realize. That's what we do here. Twice a week on Sundays and Wednesdays, we drop profound, historic, and timeless tales. So if you love stories that take you deep into the past, hit like, subscribe, and be part of the journey. The American Revolution wasn't just a war fought with muskets and cannons. It was a war fought with secrets, with shadows, with whispered messages slipped into boots and passed across enemy lines. And no place was more dangerous, more unpredictable, more lawless than Westchester County, New York. Sandwiched between British-controlled New York City and the American-held Hudson Highlands, it was a no-man's land where patriots, loyalists, spies, and raiders all played their own game. And that's where three young farmers, not soldiers, not officers, just ordinary men, stumbled into a plot so devastating it could have ended the American Revolution before it was won. Isaac Van Wart was born in 1762 in the wild countryside of New York. His world was one of hard labor and constant alertness. The forest around him was thick and unyielding, full of both natural threats and human ones. His family survived by tilling stubborn soil and hunting game in the dense woods, but war changed everything. When the revolution arrived, the land he knew became a battlefield. There were no clear front lines, just a fog of war that settled over his home. Too young to fight at first, Van Wart eventually joined the militia. Their weapons were muskets passed down from fathers and grandfathers. Their uniforms were what they wore to work in the fields, but they knew the terrain. They knew how to move without being seen, how to vanish into the trees, and most importantly, they knew when something didn't feel right. Now, every great betrayal has a beginning. And the story of the greatest traitor in American history, Benedict Arnold, begins not with treason, but with triumph. Arnold was a hero, brilliant, bold, fearless. He helped capture Fort Ticonderoga, led daring assaults, and nearly died at the Battle of Saratoga. He was the kind of leader that soldiers would follow into hell. But while his reputation rose, so did his resentment. Arnold believed he wasn't getting the credit he deserved. He was passed over for promotions, accused of corruption, dragged through the mud by his enemies. By 1779, something inside him snapped. That same year, he married Peggy Shippen, the daughter of a prominent Loyalist family. Through her connections, Arnold started writing to the British, secretly, carefully, and eventually, treasonously. What he offered them wasn't just intelligence. It was control of West Point, a fortress that dominated the Hudson River. Whoever held West Point could split the colonies in half. Arnold had just been given command of it by George Washington himself, and now he was preparing to hand it over. In exchange, the British promised him 20,000 pounds, roughly $5 million today. The plan came together in September 1780. Arnold met in secret with British Major John Andre, a polished officer who could charm just about anyone. Arnold gave him the maps, the passwords, the secrets. Andre stuffed them into his boots and set off through the woods, disguised in civilian clothes. It should have worked. It nearly did. But fate had other plans. On a dusty road near Tarrytown, Van Wart was alongside two fellow militiamen, John Paulding and David Williams. They were all barely in their 20s. Their uniforms? Again, whatever they had on their backs. Their weapons, those muskets that had been passed down for generations. That afternoon, they weren't guarding anything. They weren't chasing anyone. They were stealing a few rare minutes of peace in the middle of a war that offered very little of it. They sat low in the brush beside the Albany Post Road, passing a bottle, shuffling some cards, trying to forget the weight of the uniforms they weren't actually wearing. Then came a sound, faint, rhythmic. Not the wind, not birds, not anything natural. The kind of sound that sets something off in your gut before your brain even catches up. Hoofbeats. Slow, steady, getting louder. They froze and their cards dropped. As they stood up, fingers tightened around musket barrels. Their heartbeats were rising. Someone was coming, and whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be there. Andre rode up, trying to look casual. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but he carried himself like someone with somewhere important to be. Paulding stepped out and called, "State your business." Andre paused, then made a fatal mistake. "I'm a British officer." Had he said he was American, they might have just waved him through. But Paulding had been a British prisoner. He knew better than to trust a man just because he smiled. They searched him, pockets first, then his coat. Then they got to his boots. That's when they found the papers. Van Wart held them in his hands, and everything changed. The sketches, the defenses, the passwords. It wasn't just information. It was the blueprint for betrayal, a ticking time bomb. Andre immediately tried to bribe the three men. Gold, land, anything. His voice smooth, confident, then desperate. But Van Wart looked him in the eyes and said, "We fight for freedom, not fortune." They marched him straight to the nearest American outpost. When George Washington read the captured plans, his face hardened. This wasn't just espionage, it was treason. One of his own trusted generals had nearly sold them out. Arnold, warned just in time, escaped. He fled to a British ship and lived out his days in disgrace. Andre wasn't so lucky. George Washington respected him, so did Alexander Hamilton, even Lafayette. But the rules of the war were clear. Andre was hanged as a spy on October 2nd, 1780. Paulding, Williams, and Van Wart became heroes. The Continental Congress gave them silver medals and lifetime pensions. They met Washington, were thanked personally. Then they went home. Van Wart married, had children, lived a quiet life, the kind of life that rarely makes it into history books, except for one thing. Decades later, in 1824, a new county was founded in Ohio. They wanted to honor Isaac Van Wart, but somewhere along the way, a clerk made a mistake, swapped an A for an E, and so it became Van Wert County. A quiet name in the Midwest, a place people pass through without thinking, unless you know the story. Because that town, Van Wert, just so happens to be where I was born. And history, it's full of surprises.
New episodes drop twice a week only on Heath's Story. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribe now, leave a like and a comment, and become a member by clicking below.